Hello everyone, and welcome back to Coding with Mock. In the previous video, we talked about paths and how a path is a reference, but not really a file. Now in this video, we'll be going over one way we can actually interact with real files. Now, before we start, I would like to suggest you create a few simple text files in a separate directory somewhere on your hard drive, somewhere simple. That way, if you do make a mistake, nothing important will be gone or deleted. Now, don't worry. Normally, you won't be able to delete any system files on your computer without giving your application administrative rights. You'll get a pop-up on Windows to warn you if you do make a mistake or if you do try to delete or move a file you shouldn't be moving. And on Mac and Linux, you won't have any access period. So without using the sudo command, obviously. But I know there are a few other ways for all the power users out there, but that's not the point of these lessons. So anyway, what I want to say is this: you won't brick your computer just by following along with these lessons, okay? Now, to actually interact with the file system, we will need the files class. The files class has a few static methods we can use to do these things. And as with the path class, we won't have to worry about the underlying operating system. Java will take care of that, all of that for us. The only thing we need to worry about is using the correct paths. So if you make a path that points to nothing, it won't work. That's your only worry, okay? Now, let's see which methods are available and what they can do for us. Now, to start off with, we have the files class. That's a static class. Well, it's a class where we will be using static methods. And to start with, we're going to be looking at the exists method. Now, our exists method returns a Boolean, and the only thing it does is it tests whether a file exists or not. Okay. Now, you will see here is that you need a path, so you have to pass a path into it. And then you have options, but these are optional. We're not going to be using those. Okay. So I have to create a path first. I have to import. There we go. Of, and now I'll be using my my directory from earlier and the file from earlier. So I'm going to be working with this file, so a text file in the directory C:\data. So that's going to be C:\data / a text file.txt, right? Now I can have a look and see if this thing exists. I'll pass my file as a parameter into the exists, and this will return a Boolean B, or let's call it result, and let's output our Boolean. Simple. Now you see that my output is false. I made a little typo. There we go. Let's have another look. There we go. Now you just saw I made one typo and my path is quote unquote invalid, or it points to something that does not exist. So this is a really nice way to actually check if your path exists or not, okay? And then you can subsequently execute some code if it exists, or if it doesn't exist, you just don't execute the code. That way you can avoid causing some exceptions, right? There's other ways to use this as well, but for now, This is a real nice way of checking if a file exists and then going onwards with your code. Okay. Now, the next method that we will be looking at is a somewhat more involved method. It's a nice method, but we're going to be looking at the copy method. Now, as you could see, there's a few overloaded methods here, but we'll be looking at the first one. We won't be using any input streams or output streams. That's going to be in for the next videos. So we'll be looking at this one here. So we have a source path and a target path. Those are the two ones that you need to worry about. There's also some copy options, which we'll be looking into in a minute. But that's not for now. So if I want to copy a file, I need two paths. I need a source path and I need a target path. Because if I want to copy or move a file, I need to know where to copy it to, or your system will, or your application will need to know where to copy the new file to. So let's create a new path. And as I already said, your path doesn't have to exist yet, right? It doesn't have to point to a file that already exists. It's just a reference. So let's make a new reference to copy file.txt. Simple. Now, if I want to copy my file, this is my source file. So my first file here, this one exists. So that's my source file. And now I want to copy it to the target path, right? And if I run my code here, if everything goes well, I don't see any output because I didn't do any system outs. But if I go and look at my directory, look here, I have a copy of my file here. Nice. As I already mentioned, there's also a move. Now, we can start with my file, and I have to give it a target where to move it to. Let's say moved file. Let's target this. There we go. I'm gonna undo the copy. There we go. Let's see what happens now. There we go. And as we expected, my original text file .txt is gone now, and in its stead, I now have a moved file .txt. So you could look at it two ways. If you stay within the same directory, it's simply a rename of your file, but we can also move it to a new directory. So let's try and move it to the subdirectory here. I'm just going to copy this name. Now my original file will be this. So it will be c-moved file. And I want to copy it over to move location, path of, and let's move it to the first subdirectory. That's /data/subdirectory1, and let's keep the name file.txt. There we go. Let's see what happens now. And if I go back to my file explorer, you'll see that the file is gone. But if I go and look in subdirectory 1, you'll see that the file is here. Nice. So we can check if files exist. We can copy files. We can move files. Let's see if we can interact with directories or folders. Let's create a new path, new directory. Let's create, where do we want to create a directory? We want to do it in this data folder, and let's call it new directory. Easy enough. Again, with the files class, we can do create directory, this one here. We'll be looking at create directories in a minute. Files.create directory, and I'm just going to give it the path and see what happens. So my application ran, no exceptions, all is well. And as you can see, it created a new directory. Okay. Now, let's see what happens if I try to create a directory in another directory. You could say, well, I already did that. Well, what I want to do is new dir. This doesn't exist. And new subdir. I want to create a new dir and a new subdir all at the same time. Well, let's see what happens now. Now I'm getting an exception. Why? Because no such file exception. Why am I getting this no such file exception? Well, this happens because my new dir doesn't exist. It's trying to create new subdir, but new dir doesn't exist. How can I get around this? Well, I could first create the new dir and then subsequently create the new subdir, or, and that's an easier way, I can use the create directories, and now there's no exception. Everything's fine, apparently. And when I'm going into my data folder, I have this new dir directory or folder, and inside I have a new subdir. Nice. Okay, so with the create directory, you can only create one level of directories. With the create directories, you can create multiple levels of directories really nicely. Okay, now we can we can copy files, we can move files. Can we delete files? Let's have a look. I created this copy file here, so let's try and delete it. Copy file.txt, files.delete the path, new directory. There we go. See if this works. Again, not getting any exceptions. Very nice. And my file is gone. Oh no, the file is gone. Okay. Really nice. Now, the thing is, if I run this again, now I'm getting an exception. Woo. Why? Again, the no such file exception. So this is something where you, when working with files and file systems, sometimes your file will not be there, or it will be you made a typo, or whatever the reason. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Now, if you've paid attention, sometimes I get exceptions. That's something I really don't want. In most cases, I don't want exceptions. So, how do I solve this? Or is there another way, an easier way? There is. You can delete if exists, right? Now, see what happens. It'll just say nothing. I know my file doesn't exist. Now I just saw that I called it new directory, but anyway, you know what I'm trying to do here. My file isn't here, but the delete if exists first checks if the file exists and then tries to delete it. If it exists, it deletes it. If it doesn't, it just says, well, it's not here, so it doesn't need to be deleted. Now, this can be really handy, but also be careful with this, because if you made a typo, let's say I have a copy file, let's create the copy file. Where's my file? I put it here. Copy it, paste it here. So I have moved file. Let's try and delete if exists this file. moved file, moved file. Now I can already hear you shouting. You made a typo. No, I didn't. Look what happens. I don't get an exception. I don't get any error message. Now I made a typo. I might assume now that my file is gone. But I made a typo and my file is still there, right? So you can use the delete method, simple delete method. This way you'll get an exception if something doesn't exist. Or you can use the delete if exists, but then you won't get any exceptions, but it won't delete anything if you made a typo, right? So both methods have advantages and disadvantages. So be careful. The thing is, you just need to be aware of both of those situations, okay? So delete if exists. The copy and the move don't have any of those copy if exist. The copy if exists doesn't, and move if exists doesn't. They don't exist, those methods. So we don't have to worry there. But with the delete method, we want to be careful. Or we're deleting files, so be careful anyway. Okay. Play around with this. Create a few files on your hard drive. Try to move them. Create a few directories. But that's it for now. In the next video, we'll look into reading and writing to contents of files. So we'll be not just moving around files, but we'll be looking into a file and see what the contents are. And we'll also be looking in how to write to files simply. Okay? Be safe and see you in the next video.